Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about The Bully of Skidmore, Part 1. This is the story of Ken Rex McElroy. Before we get started in our story, I just wanted to give a little mention about Henry McLean, who is an investigator and journalist that around the time of the incident, he actually lived and spent about 3 years in the town of Skidmore. There he would actually investigate not only townspeople that would be involved in the incident that would be infamously known around 1980, but he would also talk to the family members of Ken Rex McElroy. And within this time, he would take his information, put it down, and write a biography book. He would write the book in broad daylight about the incidents and the events leading up to what happened in 1980. And this book would actually be a #1 bestseller and would eventually be turned into a film of the same name. And I just wanted to give a mention out that a lot of the things we're going to be discussing, I found a lot of my information not only from the Wikipedia, but the man who wrote this book. So if you ever have a chance, go check out the book in broad daylight. But without further ado, let's get to our story. Ken Rex McElroy would be born on June 1st, 1934, and he would be born to both parents, Tony and Mabel McElroy. Might I also add, he would be the 15th of 16 children born to this family. It is said that Tony and Mabel would be a very poor family, and most of his early childhood, they would jump between Kansas and the Ozarks. Eventually, they would rent out a 2-bedroom farmhouse that kind of just sat on the borderline of Skidmore, Missouri. And as I said, Tony and Mabel was a poor migrant tenant farming family, and they would rent this 2-bedroom farmhouse where Ken would actually have to share a bedroom with 15 of his siblings. And eventually, one of his older brothers would actually move in shortly afterwards, to where most of his life he would have to sit there and share a bedroom with about 16 or 17 siblings in this house. Tony would later say that growing up, or not really him growing up, but as Ken and his children grew up, he was kind of getting up there in age around the time that Ken was born. So a lot of times he didn't have time to discipline Ken or just be a disciplinarian. So Ken pretty much did whatever he wanted growing up. And this would actually have a big effect on how Ken McElroy would actually turn up. It is also said that Tony would also force Ken to attend school, which Ken did not want to do. It is said that during his education, or the time that he actually was in school, he hated going because he was, like I said, poor, and he didn't have money to purchase or afford really nice clothes. And a lot of his classmates would actually bully him because he didn't have nice clothes and he grew up poor. And this would continue most of his childhood. And it would just get worse when he would attend 4th grade, because then his peers would actually find out that he didn't know how to read. And this actually increased the amount of bullying that he received from his peers. Now, around the time that Ken would hit 12 years old, he would hit kind of this growth spurt. And he would actually start outgrowing most of his classmates that he went to school with. And because he started getting more physically strong and a lot larger than a lot of the other children, he would begin bullying other kids that he went to school with. He would not be the largest kid in class, but he started getting a reputation at an early age as a school bully. One classmate would actually claim that there was another boy who was a lot larger than Ken McElroy, and would say that at an early age, this kid was over 6 feet tall and over 240 pounds. But even as large as he was, he still would not cross Ken McElroy. mainly because Ken had a reputation that if any dispute or fight would break out, he would just brandish a knife and kind of bring a knife into the fight and just press it against anyone that he was fighting or disputing with, which eventually made people just kind of leave him alone. One kid would actually make a statement that if you were sitting down and eating lunch and Ken McElroy walked up to you, you just moved. And that's just the kind of reputation that he had just gotten in the time that he had went to school. That same kid would actually just make the statement, "You did not mess with Ken McElroy." One of Ken McElroy's older former friends, John, would make a statement that at this point in time, a lot of us would just hunt, fish, ride horses, and just do whatever we wanted at that time. He would also say, but a lot of times, if we knew that if we were riding horses, if we were getting near a farmer's property, a lot of us would go and just go up to the farmer's property, knock on the door, and kind of just say, "Hey, we're going to be riding horses around. We might be going on your property. Can we have permission to kind of ride through here?" But he would also make the statement that Ken McElroy just kind of believed that the rules just did not apply to him and he was just above the law. John would also make a statement that one time that they were riding their horses and they came across a fence, and McElroy would just hop off his horse and cut the fence and just ride through like he owned the place. John would also make a statement that at one point in time they were riding through a farm and a farmer actually walked out of his house and told both boys that they needed to leave his property, to where Ken would actually at 14 just look at the farmer and basically tell him to F off. Ken would actually buy himself a 1936 Ford around the time that he was 14 or 15 years old, but he didn't have a job, nor did he have a desire to work. And this is when Ken really started getting a reputation of being a town crook. One of his old peers would actually make a statement. It was the 1930s. You either went to school or got a job. And if you didn't do either, there was only one thing to get by. And this is kind of what Ken McElroy would do. Ken would actually drop out of school around the time that he was 14 or 15 years old. And around the time that he would get this 1936 Ford, he would begin going around local farms. And what he would do is he would basically look at farms that had the most potential, whether it be grain from silos, livestock, etc. And whatever farm that he found to be most successful, he would just leave. And around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, he would just approach the farm and he would basically take these bags and he would steal gas from tractors, grain from silos, until it was just up to the door of the back of his truck. For livestock, he would only pick out the best livestock that that particular farmer had, and he would hand lift it and bring it over to the back of his truck. There he would go and take whatever he stolen to a certain female that he did business with, and she would go and pay him in cash. And what she would do is take whatever he stole to a farm auction and sell it off. And what she did not pay him in cash, she would also pay him in sexual favors. It is also said that not only would he steal those items, but if he came across a farm that had the same model vehicle as his, he would actually steal parts off of that vehicle and take it home and save it for whenever he needed that certain part for his vehicle. By the time Ken was 30 years old in 1960, he had pretty much made himself a name as being a very successful businessman. And he would actually recruit adolescent boys that he trusted around the town of Skidmore. And the boys would always say that he always was fair with us. He would always pay us in cash, either 1/3 or 1/2 the selling price of the product that we would give him. And they would give him basically the same things that he had stolen, sometimes tools, sometimes other things. Eventually, some of the kids would break into some of these homes and steal furniture, where Ken at that point started jokingly referring to himself as an antique dealer.